know you from your Instagram vulgar drawing. So I wondered if we could start off with you telling us a bit more about that.
Yeah. So I used to do stand-up comedy and sketch writing, and I'd do content like this. So I would come up with jokes and stories and kind of bits about the sexism I had experienced or my friends had experienced, and try and put it in a comedy bubble to make it, you know, a bit digestible, a bit fun, a bit approachable, and because I loved comedy and I loved laughing about like the really dark things. And then I was living in Melbourne. I just kind of fell back into doing art and drawing again, and decided, I just had a light bulb moment where I decided to put two and two together and start drawing the comedy I was writing into cartoons and speech bubbles. And I just uploaded one of them online, and people wanted more, and it just snowballed. And then people were telling me, you know, their ideas that I should draw, you know, their experiences. And that was in 2018, and now 1920, 3 years later. This is my job. It's the craziest thing, but it was a total accident, but it's been the perfect, it ticks all the boxes for me in terms of having a creative pursuit and something that I really care about and something that I keep having ideas and keep wanting to do more of. So it's been great.
Fantastic. And you say in the introduction in your book that the Instagramming and then this book came out of experiences that of sexism that you had in your sort of early 20s. I wondered, I mean, and you said that you started sort of doodling on receipts and things. I mean, was there sort of one particular, I mean, are there particular moments that really stand out where, I mean, was it that you couldn't reply to, you felt that you didn't have a voice in reply to the sexism?
Yeah, I think...
What sort of things were you experiencing?
As you get, as a child, you sort of don't notice these things, and as you become a teenager, you kind of doubt yourself because you're told not to answer back to authority or people who are older than you, and often I think that they're wrong. Like, so looking back, so many of my teachers were awful. I should have absolutely talked back to them, but I just, you don't have that confidence. And then I think as I had the confidence as an adult, I started doing things like dating, getting jobs, and all those things are the realm of where sexism really happens, is really rife. Yeah. So I started to notice it just in my everyday life, and every year that I got older, more people I was encountering, more of the world I was seeing, the more sexism I was experiencing, and it was so brash and unhidden and unashamed because people didn't have consequences, so people weren't holding back. And I was working as a waitress in Melbourne whilst I was sketch writing, because obviously like creative jobs don't pay the rent, and then I had a really awful chef who was just kind of sexually harassing all the waitresses, and that was a real, like, just having to go into work and experiencing it every day, just really like blood boiling for me. So I started trying to find something cathartic, and that was being able to draw about it. And they're sort of like, I call them shower arguments. So if you have an argument with someone or a discussion with someone in the office, for example, which I'd have loads of when I was working in TV, and you say something that would really annoy you, and you just wouldn't really have quite the right reply, and then the next morning you're in the shower going over it in your head, like, I should have said that, I should have said that. Well, this is what that is. That's me being able to have clarity, going, this is, and I think a lot of my followers think that I'm this like confident woman who always answers back, but really this is all like my second thought. This is what I wish I could have said.
Oh, everyone has. I mean, God, the times I've thought that, I think everybody thinks like you never have the right words at the time, and then you sort of go away. Did you ever confront this chef? Did anyone ever confront him?
I confronted it, but it was just part of, it was tale as old as time. It was just like he was employed by the owners. The manager was kind of under his thumb. There was nothing I could do, and then it's happened in every job I've gone into, in lots of different ways. I ended up working in TV, and it was just as bad there, but in different ways. It might not be harassment, but it would be like microaggressions or everyday sexism. So it's just the little comments here and there, and even though from the outside they don't look as harmful, they build up, and they're actually probably more common than the bigger sexist subjects like domestic violence. So it's just as important to tackle them.
Yeah, because they do build that, and then it's you, or I find it's me who loses the confidence.
Exactly.
You know, rather than if you just said something, but then it's very difficult as well to say something in anger, isn't it? Because then you come across as the stereotype of the hysterical woman or something. So it's.
I mean, I hope that I'm arming people who read this and who follow me on Instagram. I'm arming them with the instant replies that I've got from my shower thoughts.
Yes. Yeah.
Because if they read it and they end up having that situation, they'll be able to refer to it as a cartoon and remember what I said you should say.
Yeah,
And they'll have
yeah.
that.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. The other thing I thought was really interesting about Kyle theory is that Kyle, you made the point that, well, 2 points really, that Kyle can be, it's anybody who uses sexism, so it can actually be women, you know, who reinforce the idea of sexism. And also, you know, I was saying, you know, I've got a son, you've got obviously father, brother. It's not all men. Can you say something a bit about how it's not? I mean, does that mean it's not the individuals who are to blame or who we should be directing attention at? It's what you call it, the patriarchy.
Right. Well, I'd say with the women being sexist as well, I think that's something really important to address, especially if you're a white woman, because I was really conscious of not coming across as like a girl boss, which is a kind of a branch of, I'd say, like white feminism that is white serving and really serves capitalism and really serves like the rich. And I think that there's sometimes a bit of a tendency for some white feminists to just, any woman in power is a great thing, but actually those women in power might be, you know, working for Trump or only employing other white women or only employing middle class people. And so it's really important to look at, even though they might be wearing like a pastel pink power suit and in the White House, it doesn't mean that they're feminists, because they might not be, you know, practicing feminist values. So I wanted to, at the beginning, say that Kyle is not just men. Kyle is everyone who perpetuates and upholds the patriarchy. And the patriarchy is what was originally built up by men and now still exists. And I kind of think of it as like a cloud or an umbrella, kind of a grey, ugly cloud that influences how we are oppressed by our gender. And when there are men, often trolls, who are really angry at the way that they're oppressed by their gender, which might be feeling insecure about their body, feeling like they should have no hair, lots of muscles like they see on Love Island, not being able to talk about their mental health, or, you know, cry in front of people or things like that, or feeling like they have to be hypersexual. All these pressures that are put on men, sometimes there's a tendency to assume that women are putting those pressures on them, but actually it's the patriarchy, and if they realise that, we can team up and fight against it together. But at the moment there's a little bit of like this men versus women thing, when really we're all on the same side. And it's, you know, this book is a little bit about trying to get people to see that. Yeah,
no, absolutely. That's what I definitely got from it. It's a very funny book, as well as, you know, with all the issues.
I hope
so. Was that very important? I mean, I know you're saying that you came from like a stand-up background, but was that, I mean, I always feel, you know, in books that it's really important. A very, very sort of successful book is one that can combine both sort of comedy and tragedy. Comedy is a very powerful and very difficult, I think, emotion to have in the written word, I think.
Well, it's like comedy's subjective, isn't it?
Yes,
so,
it is. But also, I think what I feel with comedy is that it provides the warmth that then brings you in and gives you the understanding. Is that, I mean, that was always the way you were going to go.
Yeah, I think with these sort of subjects, it's really easy to come across as lectury and kind of uppity and holier than thou. And I think when you put them in the bubble of comedy, it makes them, we're talking on the same level. There's no patronising involved. There's no, it makes something slightly educational more fun. But also I sort of describe it as rolling a poo in glitter. So it's like something that's ugly and scary and really hard to talk about, really hard to bring up in normal life. But once you put it in something funny, something colourful, it's just so much easier to have an introduction to. So I think a lot of people who follow me on Instagram are quite young women, a lot of teenagers, and this might be their first introduction to talking about feminism. So it's like getting into the shallow end.
Yeah.
It's like a little taster, and I think if it's funny, then it's much easier to also share with friends. It's uplifting, and share with friends or share with co-workers, share with exes.
Yeah.
So it's so important to me that it's in the funny thing. And yeah, you're right, like when something has humour, I think it has more heart.
Yes.
And you can connect with the characters more.
Yeah, and it really crosses boundaries, I think, barriers humour.
Yeah,
you know, it's the same sound in any language, isn't it? You know, and it creates a community, a warmth when everyone's laughing at something. So I think it works really, really well. And also, I was really interested that you've gone for the colour pink, which obviously is, you know, I mean, I was talking to somebody the other day, and she's got 2 little boys, and she was, you know, really concerned, you know, that she wanted to give them female things, you know, and pink is such a stereotypical sort of colour. So why was that a deliberate choice?
Yeah,
that you've always made.
I think a lot of people just think that I like the colour pink, and like I do, but it's more. There are 2 reasons. Firstly, pink is a great backdrop for cartooning because it goes with every colour. It goes with every colour. It highlights every colour, and it doesn't. Unlike white, it's something slightly more interesting.
Yeah.
Even though it's more expensive to print. But the actual main reason was I was trying to be. It might be a bit like niche, but I was trying to satirise feminism in the mainstream world, and I call it a bit like paper chase feminism. So when you buy like notebooks that have glitter and they say things like, you know, slay the patriarchy, bae, or whatever.
Yeah.
Like I was trying to satirise popular culture feminism and like, you know, young women feminism, and I was trying to slide in the more complex things hidden in. So it catches your eye. Yeah. It's like marketable, it's popular, but once you actually read it, it has a deeper meaning, and it's probably, hopefully, a bit more smart than maybe you would have assumed. It's not just like catchy phrases.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was really why I did it. And some people have actually got that, which is great. But for people who just like the colour pink, then that's fine. You know, there's no harm in them.
No, I think it. I mean, I think also again, to go with the humour, it's a very sort of warm colour in a way that white isn't.
Yes,
you know, that or red. You know, red suggests, you know, kind of rage or something. So it's a more subtle, but it's a very warm. It's soft, and then you've got this. It's like the whole book. You've got this sort of message that cuts through that sort of softness and candy flossy.
Yeah, candy flossy is exactly what it is.
So yeah, it's brilliant. Who did you set with your sort of Instagram and with the book? Who initially, and have you changed your mind about who your audience would be? I mean, were you thinking teenage? Were you thinking, I wish I'd had something like this when I was in my teens?
Yeah, well, I think that's kind of what started it all in terms of doing comedy about this, because growing up I never really felt like I found a feminism that fit me and my values. And then I think that's also very common with my generation versus like my mum's generation. There's a lot of clashes about different types of feminism because it's constantly evolving, which is great. But I discovered stand-up comedy because I'd obviously only ever seen panel shows, which is just men, and I discovered like women doing stand-up comedy, and they were doing what I've just been describing. So they had really funny, catchy, lightweight comedy, but there was always a real subtext underneath that, and by putting it in their material, like everyone was then engaged and able to empathise with their experience. Like someone like Amy Schumer stands up in a little black dress and talks about sexual assault, but you sort of don't realise that you're listening to that. It's so smart. It's like candy. It's wrapped in cotton wool. It shouldn't have to be, but it's a good way to reach more people. So that's why I started doing that. But in terms of my audience, so I started watching that as a teenager, and that made me feel less alone. It made me feel like, oh, this is how to reach people. So that's why I started doing it that way. And so I guess I assumed it would be the same age, about 15, 16-year-old girls. And a lot of them are. I'd say it's about 18 to 35, but there's so many more men engaged than I thought, which has just been amazing. I've developed some really amazing friendships with them online. Lots of teachers, interestingly, like because people want different ways to teach things, and someone like me always learnt better through visuals than I did through words. So a lot of them use them in PowerPoint. So like teachers in social work is a big following of mine, which I just find fascinating. And a lot of mums as well. Yeah. So I think it's great. So really, it's across the board. Yeah. And also, it's blown my mind how worldwide it is. Yeah. Like,
oh really?
Yeah. Lots of followers in the US, in India, the Netherlands. Just like it's mad. And sometimes people translate my drawings, which is cool.
Yeah. No, that's fantastic. I mean, I guess there are. I don't know, but do they control? I mean, I guess people. I'm thinking like Afghanistan, you know, where obviously the Taliban and they're down on women. I mean, I guess they never get to see Instagram.
Yeah, well, I don't have any followers in China.
No,
I think that must be. I don't think Instagram is accessible there. Yes. There's certain limits on different platforms, and I'm not sure what it is country to country. But I do have followers in Singapore, which is cool.
Wow. Yeah, no, that's
probably
that's you know, that's the sort of the big plus, isn't it, about social media?
Yeah,
you know,
reaching all those people. Yeah.
You know, it's just fantastic, and you know, whereas normally you'd have to wait for your book to be sort of sold to other countries and then going to translation and everything.
Yeah.
You've got this direct path to all these other countries.
And you can share it instantly.
Yes, yeah. But then it also sort of, on the other hand, I mean, I know you've had some really bad experiences of trolling, whatever the word is. And I recently heard you on Woman's Hour talking about incels after the terrible killings in Plymouth. I mean, do you feel hopeful about the way we're going?
Yeah, I mean, I sort of knew about incels before they came into my life, but they started commenting. So my page was shared to a men's rights group on Reddit, which is kind of like a real internet-y forum, like people who love the internet are on Reddit, and they just invaded my space basically, and they have a really distinct dialect, like a kind of language that they use. It's just like slang, but it's so vast. You could write a book on it. And really? So I recognised them immediately, and I noticed that so many of the trolls who were saying quite like aggressive, violent things were 15, 16-year-old boys, a lot of them from America. So that's when I started engaging with them, because I sort of felt like I could maybe have some leeway in changing their mind. I didn't want to argue with them, I didn't want to be aggressive, I just wanted to talk to them, human to human. A lot of it was just like, why do you hate men? And it was just about me talking to them about the patriarchy thing, all the things that are affecting you and you're allowed to be upset and angry about, because those are real issues, aren't caused by me. Women aren't the fault. It's the bigger grey cloud. And I did actually have some success with some of them. I tend to kind of draw the line at adults, because I think if you're an adult and you're doing that, it's sort of hard to pull you back.
Yes.
And it's a radicalisation process, just like religious extremism. The steps are the same online when you're radicalised as an incel. So that's why I went on Women's Hour to talk about that, because I had developed somehow over the past 2 years this really in-depth knowledge of them, because I just sort of became a bit obsessed with them, and I'm so actively online anyway. I sort of see the memes and I see the dialogue. So I do get bad trolls, but I kind of think it's sadly like part of the course, because if as soon as my followers grew, so did my trolls. And if the trolls stopped, I'd sort of think like, well, my work is done. Like, there's nothing. Everything's fine now. And the fact that they it energizes me and it gives me content. The fact that it's like, well, there's still a long way to go, so I better keep drawing.
Yeah, but are you genuinely hopeful? Do you think we are moving in a sort of direction when, I mean, you sort of think you are, and then something like that happens? And I mean, I have to admit, when I was listening to, I just really didn't know, it's like, people are being, as you say, radicalised in gaming rooms and things, and that's the danger with social media, whether it is terrorism or, that just seems to be that you can't keep control of it.
Yeah, it's impossible. I think I am hopeful, because I think it's great that people are talking about it now. So people are talking about incels now, people are learning about it, which is great. And I made a graphic which I've shared with teachers and stuff to learn about in school. And it is terrorism, because it ticks all the boxes of terrorism, but obviously lots of right-wing news outlets won't call it terrorism, because so many of most mass shooters are white, so it's that racism that's involved. But I am hopeful, because I think that the way that we talk about feminism is so much more normalised than it used to be. It's not like a cult now. It's not like a kind of niche thing that only women who go to university can talk about. And I think there's a little bit of snobbery about Instagram feminism, but I think it's great because it makes it more accessible. So I'm hopeful that young women and young men and young people will see it, and kind of it will become, in 10 years' time, you shouldn't have to say that you're a feminist, because it will be the norm.
Yes.
I guess that's what I'm hopeful about.
I mean, and I'm sure from mum's and mine experience, I mean, if we sort of said anything when we were young, you would be treated as hysterical. Wrong time of the month. I mean, smile, cheer up, all of that sort of thing. And I think, I do feel, when I look at my daughters and son, they're so much more confident in the world, and with boys, girls, other genders, other races, they're just, and so I've got to feel hopeful in that respect.
Yeah, that's good.
And you do have to think, well, yes, terrible as shootings and whatever.
Yes.
Oh, I was reading this other book about trespassing, and there was a thing about Greenham Common, which was in the 80s, and this woman sort of remembering how when they first of all they were asked why they were leaving their husbands, who was going to cook the dinner. And then they got there, and these soldiers were just sort of saying things like, "Oh, you just deserve a good raping," and things like,
God.
I mean, really,
That's so
I just think the 80s, which I know it is quite a while ago, but it doesn't feel that long ago,
Yeah. I think things have moved a lot.
Yeah.
Moved forward a lot, which is great.
Yeah, and I think, but it's great to have things like this. I mean, I really wish we, had things like that.
Good.
And I mean, it really teaches me stuff as well, because I'm not. I know, young people, but I'm not sort of very good on social media at all. And it was just really interesting, both the book and listening to you and seeing you around. So, I mean, thank you.
Thank you so
much for coming in and having a chat and signing books. And we have signed copies here at Lutyens Rubenstein.